Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Noctua at the beginning of week 2 of our class, and I am here to talk about our second major formal assignment, which is the play narrative, and that you're going to be doing this alongside the reading journals on your websites now for the next couple of weeks. But I feel like calling it a formal assignment and setting it in those terms is really a bit overselling it, because I want to start just by saying that this is really hard to do wrong. Okay, like there's a lot to take in here, but I really want the play narrative to be as much about just having exposure and experiences, and believe it or not, having fun as you're actually playing these games. And so I just, try not to get too hung up on some of the details, that this is all just about kind of giving snippets and thinking critically, as I say here, about um in the reading journals, you're thinking about how fantasy literature sort of leads into play. And then for this assignment, you're thinking about how play can really make us want to kind of narrativize what it is that we're doing in our play experiences. And so if you look at the overview, you're going to play games, and then you're going to write narratives about the experiences that you have. So basically the idea here is that you're putting yourself into the persona of whatever type of game, whether it's a board game, role-playing game, or a digital game, and basically writing a story from the point of view of whatever persona you might be playing in that game, whether it be like the leader of a village, or a hero, or a magician, right? Like that's the whole point, is that the games are meant to really get you thinking about this. So it should be just like with the journals. It's about the same length, the minimum 700-word narrative. That's going to go really quick, by the way, you guys. If you've had any experience in writing short fiction, which is essentially what I'm asking you to write here, 700 words is nothing, and that's the minimum. And then, as I point out here, in terms of the time investment that you give, it should be at least 30 minutes, so if it's a really kind of short game that you're playing, you might have to play a couple different rounds, but try not to spend more than 3 hours per week. My intent here is not that you're like sinking a lot of time into playing these games, so minimum 30 minutes I think would give you enough content to write about to get 700 words, but and then it can go up from there. Try not to spend too much time on it unless that's your thing. And I mean, like, I'm not going to stop you from playing, but there is other stuff you have to do for the class, and I'm guessing many of you are working. I will say, I'm going to talk more about this shortly. I encourage you all to find ways to play some of these games with your classmates, but that is not a requirement, and I'm going to talk more about that shortly. So it breaks down basically, and I break this down by each week. We're going to spend in week 2, the week that we're in right now, I'm just asking you to play a board or strategy game, sort of very traditional tabletop game. I recommend you use the Board Game Arena website, which I have linked to actually later on. I'll go redo that link there, but it's an online virtual tabletop that has lots of free games, and that you can actually play online, so that if you wanted to do that with your classmates, I recommend. Now, for all of these, you want to make sure it has some connection to fantasy, and so I've got a couple of recommended games available for free on Board Game Arena that you might try playing. And these also have the advantage, they're listed as being easy to learn, and on average they take 60 to 90 minutes to play. So those are just my recommendations. As I'm going to say again later on, you can just play games with your family. and write about that. You can play games with friends. I am a little tongue-in-cheek here. I'm saying you could play Warhammer Fantasy Miniatures, which is a really involved, really expensive war game, or you could play Candyland, right? If you've got that, and I'm not joking. Actually, I mean, as I mentioned here, you could certainly write up a narrative about how you rescue King Candy from Lord Licorice, and if you didn't know that that is the ostensible storyline of Candyland, then you need to go check that out. So again, this is all just recommendations, but hopefully I don't have to belabor the point. I mean, you all kind of get what a board game is. There's lots of online options that you can do for this, or again, you can just find a social group that you can play with. Or I should mention, by the way, there's actually a lot of solo card style games, or games that you could actually play by yourself. Again, if you can avoid doing that, I think it would be much part of the intent of this, of course, is that play is a socializing experience, right? So I'd prefer if you don't go the solo route for these, but that is an option if, for whatever reason, you are not able to actually either collaborate with classmates or to play games with friends. Weeks 3 and 4 are both given over to tabletop style role-playing games, as opposed to, by the way, digital role-playing games, which we're going to get to in week 5. And we're spending 2 weeks on those because they can be more involved just in learning the rule set and actually getting engaged with the games. I talk about this a lot in the guidelines here. There's a couple of different ways you could approach this. I guess in my vision for the class, I was hoping that, we can talk next in the lead up to next week, we can kind of talk about this on Discord. My expectation is that at least some of you will have experience with role-playing games, and then I would ask that maybe you offer yourselves to be game masters or dungeon masters in online sessions that you all could play together, since you have experience. But again, that's not necessary. We'll kind of see. I'm trying this for the first time, for sure. So we'll kind of play this by ear and see how it works out. One of the ways that you could certainly approach the 2-week structure, one idea that I had was simply that in the first week, you just make characters, have what's called a session 0, and I have a link to a good website. There's actually lots of websites out there devoted to having these session 0s, which is basically where you kind of talk about the rules, and then you set up your characters so that your narrative for the first, if you did a session 0, your narrative could just be talking about, basically the classic, these are our characters and they met at an inn, kind of, and, the setting up then what happens in the second week in week 4 narrative, which is where you're actually going to be playing it out. If you're playing with a group that has more experience and you all just kind of want to jump into it, you could certainly just do a 2-week kind of extended, cliffhanger style narrative. That would be great. Or if you're really into it, you could do shorter, sort of easier role-playing games, and you could try out different games 2 weeks in a row. All of those are viable options. Those of you who have had me for my 300 level fantasy lit class, I have linked here to the 1-page role-playing games that we played for that class. There's lots of these sort of short, easy to learn RPGs that are out there. The basic difference, by the way, between the tabletop RPGs and the board games, of course, is that with there are no winners, right? I mean, like, these are totally collaborative games that you really are just playing to have the experience. So in a lot of ways, the other aspect of this is we're spending 2 weeks on tabletop role-playing games because they lend themselves so well to creating narratives, right? I mean, you will very naturally have stories that come out of your experience of playing these games. And then finally, for week 5, I want you to play digital games. And yes, these are video games. Okay. So again, you are more than welcome. There are 8 bajillion fantasy themed adventure games, arcade style games even you could play, as long as they have a sort of fantasy type narrative to them. I know it's brand new, so relatively new. So, I mean, Tears of the Kingdom, Legend of Zelda would absolutely fit into this if any of you are playing that right now. Skyrim, any number of games that are out there would fit into this. Here again, I encourage you. There are lots of collaborative online, these massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs. Many of them that you can download the game itself for free. And then of course, they're going to try to get you to pay for content. You don't have to do that for this class. But if you all could collaborate on that, I think that would be wonderful. But it is, again, if you just want to play a video game for a half an hour, right, and write a narrative of it. I mean, right. Having just said that, hopefully you can appreciate again, that it's not, you can't do this wrong. And this really is just about kind of thinking about these connections and getting them written down in a narrative. So collaborating, again, basically, you're not at all required to do it. It just gives you a leg up, because just to jump down here to the assessment criteria, collaborative work is one of, I'm sorry. In other words, if you managed to schedule a time to play with your classmates, you're already getting yourself closer to the A for the assignment, is kind of so it just completely rewards you for doing that, but again, is not at all a requirement. If it's like, because I know a lot of you are working and it can be tough to arrange those schedules, but if you can manage to do it, it's just an added bonus. And then I list on the guidelines here, there's lots of different ways digitally that you can work together to get together to do this sort of thing. By the way, collaboration doesn't have to be a big group. I mean, the intent is certainly not the whole class couldn't play many of these games. So if it's even one other person, that counts. Okay, so just to kind of throw that out there. And for the assessment criteria, some of the other things are this is not a workshopping creative writing class. So, I mean, a lot of this has to do with, are you bringing other, is the narrative going beyond just a sort of step-by-step accounting of what happened? And are you actually trying to incorporate kind of like narrative tropes of fantasy literature into your narratives? Are you trying to make it aesthetically pleasing? Do you have audience rhetorical awareness? Those sorts of things. And things that I am, having seen all of you writing on Discord for the first week, I am guaranteed that you'll be doing these anyway. So again, this is all going to be it is, you can't do this wrong, especially because for this one is creative work. So however you want to approach these narratives, as long as they meet that minimum 700 word requirement and they talk about a game that you've actually played, you're fulfilling the terms of the assignment. So this will be linked on Blackboard. It'll be linked on the syllabus. And if you have any questions, post those in the comments to this video or